I didn't plan on ending up in the Great Smoky Mountains. I didn't plan on ending up anywhere, really. After my father died last winter, I sold what was left of his hardware store in Knoxville and drifted for a while, sleeping in my truck, doing odd jobs, trying to convince myself I was starting fresh. It wasn't until I saw the posting from the National Park Service that I thought, maybe this is it. A job in the wilderness. A chance to be quiet, to stop thinking about the store, the debt, and the slow rot of a life that had gone nowhere. The ad was simple. Seasonal ranger needed. Great Smoky Mountains, North District. Housing provided. When I arrived at the ranger station in the tiny town of Tremont, the man waiting for me was old enough to have been part of the mountain itself. His name was Supervisor Arnold Keller, though everyone called him Cap. He wore the uniform like it had grown around him. Faded green, patched elbows, had brim curled down from decades of rain. "You must be Anderson," he said, squinting at me through glasses that looked permanently smudged. "You ever done park work before?" "Not officially," I admitted. "I've done construction, maintenance, figured I could handle anything outdoors." He grunted, nodding in approval, then slid a folder across the desk toward me. "Paperwork's just a formality. You'll be stationed at Camp Hallow Point, Northwestern Ridge, near the old watchtower. Beautiful view, long shifts, quiet nights. You'll get used to it." The folder contained the usual: liability waivers, schedules, a radio code sheet. But near the bottom was something handwritten, yellowed paper, creased and spotted with age. The title read, "Rules for Night Operations." I skimmed the first few lines and frowned. "Once the sun has fully set, do not look directly at any light source more than 50 feet away. 2. Keep your radio on channel 3, even if you hear interference. Do not answer any calls from channel 5 after midnight. 3. If you see another ranger outside your cabin between midnight and 4 a.m., verify their name twice. If they repeat yours before answering, go inside immediately. 4. If you hear whistling from the tree line, do not investigate. 5. No matter what happens, never leave the path after dark." I looked up. "This is some kind of joke, right?" Cap's face didn't move. "You follow those rules, you'll do fine." "But," he cut me off, "you'll understand soon enough. The Smokies have character. Things get strange when the fog rolls in." He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. "Last ranger up there was a good kid, sharp, didn't follow the rules." "What happened to him?" Cap gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Transfer. Couldn't handle the isolation." That night, I drove up the winding road toward Hallow Point, headlights, catching the shimmer of mist curling off the mountains. The forest seemed endless, layers of shadow and silver light, like the world was folding in on itself. My assigned cabin sat near the old fire tower, half swallowed by vines and moss. Inside, the walls were lined with maps, most dating back decades. There was a small cot, a desk, and a radio with a handwritten note taped above the dial. "Keep it on channel 3. Always." The first few days were uneventful. I patrolled the trails, logged minor debris reports, and fixed a broken lock at one of the supply sheds. Occasionally, I'd hear Cap's voice over the radio, crackling through the static. "Everything quiet up there, Anderson?" "Quiet as it gets." "Good, keep it that way." But the nights were different. Around sunset, the woods would fall silent in a way that wasn't natural. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just the heavy pulse of my own heartbeat and the low whisper of wind brushing through the trees. The darkness here wasn't absence, it was presence. It felt like the world itself was inhaling and never exhaling. On my 4th night, the fog rolled in earlier than usual, swallowing the treetops. I stood on the porch, radio humming faintly beside me, and watched the light from my cabin window stretch into the mist. That was when I saw it. A faint glow, maybe 100 feet down the path, hovering among the pines. At first I thought it was another ranger with a flashlight, but the light didn't move naturally. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and I remembered Rule 1, do not look directly at any light source more than 50 feet away. I looked away, forcing myself to breathe. "It's nothing," I whispered. "Maybe a lantern reflection." "Maybe." The radio hissed. "Durson." The voice was faint, buried in static. "Cap?" I said, pressing the button. No response. Then again, clearer but warped, like someone was mimicking him. "Anderson, come outside. Need your help down the ridge." The words sent a shiver through me. My thumb hovered over the button. Cap had told me he'd be in Tremont for the week, 30 miles away. I switched channels. "Cap, are you on 5? Static. Then, low and deliberate, the voice came again. "You shouldn't be alone out there." I dropped the radio. My hands were shaking. I could see the glow still pulsing in the distance, closer now. Without thinking, I grabbed the paper with the rules and held it up as if the words themselves could protect me. Channel 3. Stay on Channel 3. Don't look at the light. I flicked the radio back to 3. The static returned, calm and familiar. For a long time, nothing happened. Then a faint whistling drifted from the tree line, soft, almost melodic. It reminded me of something my father used to hum while he worked, the kind of tune that stuck to your bones. Every instinct told me to step forward to see who was there, but I didn't. I shut the cabin door, drew the curtains, and sat on the floor with the radio in my lap until sunrise. When I reported it to Cap the next morning, he didn't sound surprised. "Good," he said. "You followed the rules. That's what matters." "What the hell was that?" Silence crackled through the line. Finally, he said, "You ever notice how these mountains look older than they should? Like they're remembering something we've all forgotten?" I didn't know how to answer. He sighed. "You're doing fine, Anderson. Just keep the lights low at night. And if you ever hear that whistle again, don't hum along." That evening, I went through the logbook left by the previous ranger. Most of it was mundane: weather reports, trail maintenance, wildlife counts. But near the end, the handwriting became erratic. Lines crossed out, words smeared by what looked like water or sweat. The final entry stopped me cold. "It's not the forest that moves, it's the world around it. The light isn't theirs, it's ours, reflected back wrong. If anyone reads this, don't trust the voices, they sound like people you know." The page ended there, torn mid-sentence. Outside, the sun slipped below the horizon, and the last thing I saw before night fell was the reflection of my own lantern in the window, except there was no lantern lit inside the cabin. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that flickering light, suspended in the fog, pulsing like a heartbeat inside the trees. The cabin walls groaned as the wind pressed against them, and sometimes I swore I could hear faint footsteps just outside the door, pacing the porch as though waiting for permission to come in. By morning, the fog had thinned, revealing the woods drenched in dew. I stepped outside to find something strange on the steps, a small pile of stones stacked in a perfect spiral. I crouched down and studied them. They weren't there before. The pattern was too deliberate, too human, yet no boot prints disturbed the soil around them. I logged the sighting, though I hesitated to describe it. The Park Service wanted everything recorded: bear tracks, erosion, fire risk. But I didn't think impossible geometry made of rocks would sit well in the daily report. Around noon, I hiked down to the supply shed near the ridge. The woods were quiet again, eerily so. The Smokies were never silent for long. Even on still days, there was always the buzz of insects or the chatter of birds. But now there was nothing. I felt as if I'd stepped into a vacuum where sound had been swallowed whole. Halfway to the shed, I met another ranger. She was tall, maybe in her late 30s, with a weathered face and dark eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her name tag read M. Dawes. "You're the new one," she said flatly. "Anderson, right?" "That's me." She studied me for a moment, then nodded toward the ridge. "You hear the whistling yet?" The question caught me off guard. "Yeah, last night." Her expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened. "Then you've already met them." "Met who?" "You'll see," she said, then turned away, adjusting the strap on her rifle. "Stay on the path, and if you find the stones again, don't touch them." She walked off before I could ask anything else. When I reached the shed, I found the door ajar, the lock twisted off as if wrenched by something stronger than human hands. Inside, tools were scattered, boxes overturned, and along the far wall, deep scratches ran from floor to ceiling. Parallel grooves spaced evenly apart. They looked like claw marks, except no animal I knew of could make cuts that clean. I radioed it in. Cap's voice came back after a long pause. "Don't worry about the shed," he said. "Just secure what you can and leave the rest. It looks like something tore through here." I said, "Leave it. It's not your concern." There was something in his tone, something tired, almost defeated. When I got back to the cabin, the stone spiral was gone. Not scattered or blown away, just gone. The steps were bare, clean, as if they'd never been touched. I tried to eat dinner, but the food sat like gravel in my stomach. By sundown, I found myself staring at the radio again. The note above the dial, "Keep it on channel 3. Always," felt more like a warning than a reminder. At 10:42 p.m., static broke through the quiet. "Anderson, you there?" It was Dawes. Her voice was steady but low, barely above a whisper. "Yeah, everything okay?" There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, rapid and uneven. "I'm at post 71, she said. "Do you see lights in your sector?" I hesitated. "No, not yet." "Good. If you do, don't call out. Don't turn your radio off no matter what you hear. They like to mimic the signal." "Who are they?" But she'd already cut the transmission. I sat for hours, the radio pressed against my leg, the cabin light dimmed to a flicker. Outside, the woods had swallowed the world again. The line between trees and sky had disappeared into a single mass of darkness. At some point after midnight, the radio crackled. "Anderson." I froze. The voice wasn't Dawes, it was mine. "Anderson," the voice repeated, distorted, stretching the syllables. "You should come outside. It's beautiful tonight." Every hair on my body stood on end. The voice had my tone, my inflection, everything but the rhythm. It was like hearing a recording of myself played backward. I turned the dial to channel 5, then immediately back to 3, afraid of what I might hear if I lingered. The static faded, and for a moment there was only silence. Then the doorknob rattled. I grabbed my flashlight but didn't turn it on. My pulse pounded in my ears. The door rattled again, harder this time, then stopped. A whisper came through the crack beneath it. "You dropped something." I looked down. A small stone just inside the threshold, wet with dew, shaped like an eye. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there, staring at it until the faintest gray of dawn began to creep through the window. When I finally stepped outside, the ground around the cabin was covered in those same stones, hundreds of them, arranged in spirals that all pointed toward the forest. By the time I radioed Cap, my hands were shaking too hard to hold the receiver steady. "Something's wrong here," I said. "No one's been up there," he interrupted. "Listen to me carefully, Anderson. You need to follow the routine. Patrol at dawn, rest at noon, lights out before sundown. Don't deviate." "Cap, I think someone's trying to mess with me." He sighed, the sound of it thick with something unspoken. "They're not trying to mess with you. They're trying to invite you. Don't give them what they want." The transmission ended. For the rest of the morning, I sat on the porch with my coffee gone cold, watching the fog slither through the trees. Every so often, I thought I saw something move inside it. Too tall to be human, too thin to be real. When I finally looked back toward the door, the spirals were gone again. That night, I barricaded the entrance, drew the curtains, and sat by the radio until my eyes burned from exhaustion. Sometime after midnight, between one breath and the next, the static shifted into a faint hum, low, resonant, almost like the forest itself was exhaling through the wires. And from somewhere deep inside that sound, I heard my own voice whisper, "You're already part of the mountain now." When morning came, I found myself sitting upright in the chair, the radio still hissing faintly beside me. I couldn't remember falling asleep, yet my neck ached and my mouth tasted of iron. The cabin was dim. Light filtered weakly through the fog, pressing against the windows. For a moment, I wasn't sure where I was. Everything felt slightly off, as though the cabin had shifted an inch to the left while I slept. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Wet soil, copper, and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. I followed it to the corner near the cot, where a dark patch stained the wooden floorboards. It looked almost like water, except when I touched it, my fingertips came away sticky. The forest outside was silent again. No birds, no wind. Even the trees looked unnaturally still, as though they were holding their breath. I turned on the radio, hoping to hear another human voice. Cap's voice came through almost immediately. "Anderson, you awake?" "Yeah," I said, my throat dry. "Something's wrong. There's something in the cabin, a smell." "Don't open the door," he said quickly. "Stay put. They're testing you." "What do you mean, testing me?" He hesitated. The static buzzed like insects in the pause. "Every ranger who's made it past the first week has gone through this. The mountain pays attention, Anderson. It watches who listens and who doesn't." "This isn't making sense, Cap. It's not supposed to. Just stay inside until the fog lifts." Then the transmission cut out. The rest of the day crawled. I tried to read the logbook again, but the words swam on the page, blurring until the ink looked like veins spreading under the paper. I closed it quickly, my pulse spiking. At dusk, Dawes appeared. I didn't hear her approach. She was just there, standing by the tree line, staring at the cabin. The last light of day made her face look carved from stone. I opened the door a crack. "Dawes, you shouldn't be here after sundown." She didn't answer right away. Then in a flat tone, she said, "I needed to see you." Her voice sounded distant, muffled, as if coming through a wall of water. "You're not supposed to leave your post," I said. "Cap's orders." Her eyes shifted toward the window behind me, not meeting mine. "Did you look at the light last night?" I froze. "No." "Good." She stepped closer, her boots silent on the dirt. "They're curious about you. That's not common." "What are you talking about? You'll find out soon enough." She looked past me again, then added softly, "If you hear me calling from the woods tonight, don't answer." And then she was gone. Not turned or walked away, just gone. I slammed the door shut and checked the radio. Channel 3 was dead. No Cap, no Dawes, just static and the faint hum that seemed to vibrate under my skin. At midnight, the air changed. It wasn't temperature or wind, it was something deeper. A shift in the atmosphere, like the entire forest had drawn closer to listen. The hum grew louder until it matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. Then the whistling started. It was the same tune as before, the one that sounded almost like my father's old habit while he worked. I covered my ears, but it didn't stop. The sound was inside me now, vibrating through bone instead of air. The door creaked. I turned the flashlight toward it and saw the knob slowly twist. The barricade I'd built began to shudder as though something massive was pushing from the other side. I backed up to the far wall, radio clutched in both hands. "Cap, if you can hear me? Someone's here." No response. The wood groaned, splintering. Then everything stopped. Silence. I stood there, trembling, waiting for another sound, but none came. Slowly, I edged toward the door. The knob was still. The air was heavy with the smell of rain and decay. And then I heard it, my own voice whispering from the other side of the door. "Anderson, open up. It's okay now." It was perfect. Every inflection, every pause. But there was one thing wrong. I could hear it breathing, and the rhythm wasn't mine. I stepped back, gripping the flashlight so tightly my knuckles burned. The voice came again. "It's cold out here. You should let me in." I didn't answer. The silence stretched, and then the whisper changed. It deepened, twisting, stretching my name into something unrecognizable. "Enter, son." The flashlight flickered. The cabin walls seemed to warp in and out of focus, the edges bending as if I were underwater. I stumbled back against the desk, knocking the logbook to the floor. It fell open to a page I hadn't noticed before, one scrawled in jagged handwriting that barely resembled English. The letters curved into shapes that looked more like symbols than words. The only part I could read clearly was a line near the bottom. "If it learns your rhythm, it can step through the door." My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The breathing on the other side stopped, and for a moment I thought maybe it was over. Then, slowly, something slid under the door. Long, pale fingers, jointed wrong, moving in slow, deliberate motions like they were learning how to be hands. I kicked at them, shouting. They withdrew, leaving behind faint streaks of dark liquid that steamed on the wooden floor. The radio crackled back to life. "Anderson?" Cap's voice said, urgent. "Whatever you do, don't fall asleep. Keep the lights dim. Keep your eyes closed if the walls start to move." "Cap, what the hell is happening?" "They're crossing over. The rules keep you separate. If you see the spirals again, destroy them before dawn." The transmission cut out before I could respond. Outside, the fog pressed hard against the windows, swirling like something alive. I could see faint shapes moving within it. Tall, slow, deliberate. Every few seconds, one of them brushed close enough to the glass that I could see the outline of a face, but it wasn't human. The proportions were wrong, as though something ancient was trying to remember what people were supposed to look like. I turned away and sat with my back to the wall until my eyes blurred with exhaustion. At some point near dawn, I must have dozed off despite myself. When I woke, sunlight spilled weakly through the window and the cabin was empty again. The marks on the floor were gone, the air still and cold. But outside the door, etched into the dirt with impossible precision, were new spirals. Perfect, concentric, and arranged in pairs, one for each footprint leading away from my cabin. As I stared at them, the radio clicked once, though I hadn't touched it. Then, faintly, my own voice came through, calm and steady. "Morning, Cap, all clear at Hollow Point." I stared at the radio, unable to breathe. The voice had been mine, composed, casual, carrying that same tone I used when giving morning reports. But I hadn't touched the transmitter. I hadn't said a word. For a long time, I didn't move. The forest outside was pale with morning mist, the trees rising like black ribs through the fog. I forced myself to look around the cabin, to make sure I was still here. My coffee cup sat where I'd left it. The cot was unmade. Everything looked ordinary, mundane, almost comfortingly so. But the spirals outside remained. I stepped carefully to the door and peered out. The patterns carved into the dirt hadn't faded with the wind. They were deeper now, pressed into the earth like they'd been burned there. And as I watched, I realized they weren't random. The lines curved and branched in ways that reminded me of fingerprints. Each spiral had minute whorls within whorls, complex and organic, like the ridges of skin. I counted them. 9 pairs, perfectly mirrored, leading away into the woods. Footprints that weren't mine. I tried the radio again, but the line to Cap was dead. Channel 3 hummed faintly, the same low vibration I'd heard last night, the one that seemed to resonate somewhere behind my ribs. I switched to Channel 5 against my better judgment. For a few seconds, there was only silence, then a faint sound, breathing. Not mechanical, not static, just a slow inhale followed by a long, deliberate exhale. I turned it off. By noon, I couldn't stay inside any longer. The air felt thick, almost oily, as if the cabin was slowly filling with invisible smoke. I strapped on my pack and took the rifle from the rack, standard issue, though I wasn't sure what good it would do, and stepped outside. The fog clung low to the ground, curling around the trees like something alive. I followed the paired footprints down the path for maybe a quarter mile until they split apart, one set veering left, the other right. And between them stood Dawes. She looked the same as before. Uniform crisp, face unreadable, rifle slung across her shoulder. But there was something off in her eyes. A glaze, a distance. "Morning," she said. I hesitated. "How long have you been out here?" "Since dawn." I tried to sound casual. "Did you radio Cap this morning?" She frowned. "No. Why?" My pulse quickened. "There was a transmission," I said slowly. "Someone used my voice." Dawes didn't blink. "Then you should know what that means." I swallowed hard. "No, I don't." She tilted her head. "It means something's wearing you, or trying to." I stared at her. "What the hell does that?" Before I could finish, the radio on her shoulder crackled. Static, followed by her voice. Her exact voice. "Dawes," it said, "you shouldn't be out there. It's too close." She went pale. For a second, neither of us moved. The woods were utterly silent again, so still it made my ears ring. Then she turned sharply toward the sound. "Channel 5, she whispered. I didn't understand. "What?" "They only use 5 once they've learned the shape of your voice." Her radio clicked again. "Dawes, come in! Dawes!" The words were hers, but stretched, distorted, as though something was pushing them through the wrong kind of mouth. "We have to move," she said quickly. "Now." We hiked in silence for nearly a mile, following an old service trail that wound down toward the river basin. The fog thickened the deeper we went, and soon I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The forest seemed to press in around us, the trees bending unnaturally close as if eavesdropping. Finally, Dawes stopped. "This far enough," she said. I looked around. The trail ended at a collapsed wooden bridge. The river below was little more than a dark ribbon, barely visible through the haze. "Far enough for what?" She set her rifle down carefully. "For me to tell you the truth." Her voice trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. "These rules Cap gave you, they're older than the Park Service. Older than this country. The Smokies were here before anything had a name, and the people who first came through figured out there were places the world thinned out, places where you could hear echoes. The rules keep those echoes quiet, for most of us anyway." "Echoes?" she nodded. "That's what they are at first, but they learn, they grow, they want form." My mouth went dry. "And if they get it," she looked at me with something like pity, "then you stop being you become the doorway." A sound broke through the fog then, a sharp, snapping noise like a branch cracking under weight. We both froze. Another sound followed. Wet footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. Dawes raised her rifle. I could barely see her outline now. The fog had grown so dense it felt alive, brushing cold fingers across my arms and face. Something moved just beyond the tree line. A tall shape, indistinct, shifting with the mist. "Stay back," Dawes hissed. The thing stepped closer. I could almost make out its features, but the more I tried to focus, the less human it looked. It wasn't walking, it was folding, bending through space in a way that made my stomach twist. Then it spoke. "Dawes," it said in her voice. "Lower the gun." She fired. The blast tore through the fog, echoing off the trees. When the smoke cleared, the shape was gone. We stood there, panting. The air stank of ozone and something faintly sweet, the same scent I'd smelled that morning. She turned to me. "We need to get back to your cabin. Now." We moved quickly up the ridge, but the forest had changed. The trail curved where it hadn't before. Trees stood where clearings should have been. It was as though the mountain had rearranged itself while we were gone. By the time we found the cabin again, dusk had already settled. Dawes went straight to the door, paused, and frowned. "You moved the markings," she said. I stared at her. "What markings?" "The ones you make to keep the boundary intact." "I didn't touch anything." She turned to me slowly. "Then they did." I looked down. At the base of the door, etched into the wood, was a new spiral, carved deep, the grooves filled with something dark and wet. Dawes exhaled shakily. "They've chosen you." I wanted to speak, to ask what that meant, but the words wouldn't come. My radio clicked on, faint static whispering through. Then, layered beneath the noise, came a chorus of voices. All of them mine, each one speaking the same words in perfect unison. "It's almost dark, Anderson. Time to come home." I don't remember dropping the radio. One moment, it was in my hand, vibrating with the sound of my own voice layered over itself a dozen times. The next, it hit the cabin floor with a crack that felt final. The sound didn't stop, though. It kept whispering from somewhere deeper in the wood. From the walls. From under the floorboards. Dawes was standing near the window, staring into the tree line. Her face was ghostly pale. "They don't usually move this fast," she said. I forced my voice to stay steady. "What are they doing?" "They're trying to open the way," she said quietly. "Once they pick someone, the rules aren't enough anymore." I swallowed hard. "You mean they picked me?" Her eyes didn't leave the forest. "They don't pick you, Anderson. They pick what wears you." I didn't know what that meant, but I didn't want to ask. Outside, the last light was fading from the sky. The fog that had thinned through the afternoon had returned, half thicker and darker than before. It didn't look natural anymore. It rolled in from the trees like smoke from something burning deep underground. Then came the sound. It wasn't footsteps this time. It was breathing, slow, heavy, coming from just beyond the walls. Dawes raised her rifle. "Don't move." she whispered. A shadow passed across the window. The glass frosted instantly, a white bloom spreading from where the shadow touched. Then, 3 knocks on the door. Deliberate. Even. I froze. Dawes whispered, "Don't answer it." The knocking came again, louder this time. Then, through the door, a voice said, "Ranger Anderson, this..." Her head. "That's not him." The voice came again, sharper now. "Anderson, I'm ordering you to open this door." I hesitated. What if it is him? Dawes turned to me, her voice trembling but firm. "Blake's been dead for 2 days." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" She lowered her rifle slightly. "He broke one of the rules. Tried to leave after dark. We found what was left of him at the tree line. We buried him ourselves." I shook my head. "No, I talked to him yesterday." "No, you didn't." The thing outside began to scratch at the wood, slow and deliberate, like it was tracing patterns into the door. I glanced down and saw the spirals, those same looping, fingerprint-like whorls, beginning to bloom again in the wood grain, spreading outward from the knob. Dawes aimed at the door. "When I say run, you run." Before I could respond, the door buckled. A long crack split the center, and a hand, if you could call it that, pushed through. It was too pale, too smooth, like the idea of a hand more than a real one. Its fingers bent the wrong way as it groped along the inside of the door. Dawes fired. The blast shattered the upper panel, filling the cabin with smoke and splinters. "Go!" she yelled. We ran out the back, into the dark. The fog was so thick now that it swallowed our flashlights within seconds. The forest no longer looked like the forest. Every tree seemed wrong, too close or too far, their silhouettes twisting into unfamiliar shapes. My lungs burned as we ran, but no matter how far we went, I could still hear the breathing behind us, slow, steady, patient. Finally, Dawes grabbed my arm and pulled me behind a rock outcropping. We crouched there, trying to catch our breath. "Listen," she said, "there's only one way to end it." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" She looked me dead in the eyes. "You have to make it forget your voice." "How the hell am I supposed to do that?" "You stop being you," she said. "You stop answering when it calls. You stop thinking in words. You stop saying your name." "That's insane." "Insane's better than hollow." The forest went quiet again. Not silent, quiet in that way that feels too complete, like the world's holding its breath. Then, somewhere close, a sound, a faint echo of my own voice. "Anderson." It came from the fog, maybe 20 feet away. "Anderson, are you hurt?" Dawes mouthed, "Don't answer." But the thing knew. It spoke again, softer this time. "Marcus." My heart stopped. No one here knew my first name. Not Cap, not Dawes, not anyone. That was the moment I realized it wasn't imitating me anymore.